Hi everyone, we'll just wait a couple more minutes for a few more people to join and then we'll start. All right, I think we'll give it a start as we're on our lunch hour as well. So just letting everyone know that's joined in that we have recorded the session just to make it available to people who are unable to attend today, and also for people to watch back on it if you feel like you would like to access it again. So hello everyone and welcome. My name is Maddie and I'm the Health Promotion Officer here at Council. Just asking if anyone has my name popped on their camera. I'm happy for you to change it. We've just got a little glitch there, so happy for that to be adjusted. So I'd like to formally welcome everybody to attending today, and I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri, Wurrung and Burrunung people, and we recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I recognise that we might have some people with us today on other lands, and you're welcome to share this in the chat on the land that you're on. It's my pleasure today to welcome for a healthy eating event, Pack a Healthy Lunchbox, Leanne. So thank you for joining us today. You know that this time of year has been busy for a lot of parents, and you might also have a lot of children amongst you, but you've been preparing for school preparation for the start of the year over the last month. So we know that parents also want the best for their children, and this includes developing healthy food behaviours and providing their kids with the right foods for their growth and nutrition development, the concentration at school. So from this session, we're here to provide you with some ideas and also help you with interpreting some school lunch packing ideas, as well as reading nutrition labels. So now I'll pass it to Leanne to start presentation. Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks very much, Maddie and Monash Health for having me. Before I continue, I just want to check that everyone can hear me loud and clear and can see the screen. If there's any issues, please just type it in the chat box for us to work through it. I'm very happy to talk to everyone today about packing a healthy lunchbox. And before we proceed, hang on, I'm just going to check that my slides are working. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So I too would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I am on, which is that of the Ngunnawal people. And I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Before I proceed with the talking all things lunchbox, a little bit about us. So Nutrition Australia is a not-for-profit organisation. We're a health promotion charity. We're all about inspiring healthy eating for all Australians. I'm coming to you from Nutrition Australia ACT, and so I coordinate the ACT entity. And I also coordinate Healthy Lunchbox Week, which happened a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now. And that is a national campaign that's all about providing schools, families, and the general community with healthy lunchbox tips and ideas. A bit about myself. So I am an accredited practicing dietitian and have been for the past 20 plus years. And I work primarily in the community space, so community and public health, but I also do operate a private practice once a week. So I sort of straddle a bit of clinical, private practice and community. And I do have 2 children. They're now teenagers. One has just finished school and my second child is now in year 11. So I have gone through the journey of lunchboxes over many, many years and can certainly speak from personal experience here as well as my professional knowledge. And I really hope that you do get something useful from these sessions and practical ideas just to help get through that morning madness and to make sure that we are setting our children up for a healthy start, and ourselves for that matter. So take on this information for yourself as well. And if you do have any comments, questions or otherwise, please pop them in the chat box and the Q&A box, and we will aim to address them at the end of the session. So as we're going through each of the different topics that I'll be talking about, you'll probably have a quick question, chuck it in the chat box, and hopefully we'll get a chance to address that at the end of the session. Okay, so now they're talking primarily about lunchboxes, and I tend to, when I think about lunchboxes, I think about school, think about in the early childhood space, school and beyond. But if we're focusing on particularly lunchboxes at schools, thinking about fueling our children. And we know that kids who eat well, they're going to have more sustained energy throughout their busy day at school. If we provide the right sorts of foods to support their energy levels. And in doing so, that energy level will help to maintain their alertness and ability to concentrate. So fueling our children both physically and mentally is really important with the foods that we choose to put in their lunchbox. And of course, that will help with their mental clarity. And at the end of the day, they'll become better learners. And we all know that when we are fueled well, we can think well and we can get through our days much easier. All right. And when we think about our lunchboxes and our children's lunchboxes, I think it's fair to say we all want nutritious, we want healthy food, because we know healthy food is going to make us healthy individuals. But we also want to make sure it's convenient. It can't take too much time. Sometimes we can get a bit caught up around the axles over trying to create these beautiful lunchboxes. So there does have to be an element of convenience there. Expense is a big factor, so we don't want to have to be spending too much money on our kids' lunchboxes. And of course, it also needs to be appealing for children. So what we think might be amazing, it might not be that fantastic for our children. So always thinking about how it appeals to them as well. So that leads us to all of the decisions we make around our lunchbox. So let's go through some of those decisions. So time, I mentioned earlier. If you're a parent like me, quite often you get into those stages where you are in a busy morning and you just haven't got a lot of time on your hands to pop food in the lunchbox. So time is a huge factor when it comes to preparing a lunchbox for your children every day. And we just don't necessarily have time to labour over any fancy stuff. Our children's preferences. So as parents, we know, and carers, we know what our children should probably be eating. I, as a dietitian, usually don't have to tell people what is healthy. I think we all know what is healthy, but we also know what our child will eat. So it's often a compromise. You know, we've got to get that balance between what we know is important and nourishing for our children and also what they will eat, because no one likes food wastage and none of us like to see the food come back home uneaten. Then, of course, there's the cost I've already talked about. And quite often, you know, many people think that eating healthy can be expensive. But I'm here to give you some ideas on how to overcome that whole idea that eating healthy is expensive. You know, and sometimes some simple swaps that can be quite cheap. and convenient. You know, fruit, for instance, whatever's in season. So often some fruit or even carrots, which are quite cheap at the moment as well, can be a whole lot cheaper than buying some of those so-called lunchbox foods that are in packets and so on. That can be really expensive. Then there's the food availability. So that's what we might have at home, and also you know, from the shops and where we may be choosing to buy our food. So you know, sometimes all we might have is just some bread and Vegemite, and that's okay because that's all there is in the house. Some food may be obtained from charitable food pantries, and there's limited choice available. And sometimes you just hung out to dry. You know, there's not much food in the house, and you've got to pop by the shops on the way to school to buy some things for your child's lunchbox, or perhaps if you're lucky enough, have a canteen that provides healthy options that you can fall back to purchase some food for your child at school. So that's a big factor when it comes to choosing the food in a lunchbox. Food safety, and I will go into a bit more detail about food safety, but we always do need to make sure that the food that we are providing for our children is going to be safe for consumption by the time they get around to eating it. So as you can imagine, we're in hot weather at the moment. We want to make sure that that food will stay cool and it will stay in a safe, you know, enticing, still nice to eat, but it won't be hitting the heat and the bacteria won't be growing in that food as it progresses during the day. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can make sure the food is kept safe in the lunchbox and prevent that bacterial growth of harmful bacteria in our children's food. And then finally, there's often some school rules applied. So school rules, I think, some of the valid school rules are things around, you know, schools that are nut-free, for instance, and so being mindful of not putting nuts in your child's lunchbox or nut bars, particularly when there are other children at the school that may have severe allergic reactions to nuts. So there may be some schools that have rules around that. Hopefully there aren't any explicit rules around what goes in the lunchbox. I think it's entirely up to the parents and carers to decide what goes in their child's lunchbox, and schools do need to take a step away from that and not to be too directive. And some schools also have like what do we call, like waste-free kind of rules as well, so minimizing packages and so on. But I think sometimes that can get a bit very overwhelming for parents too. So I think, you know, from my perspective, when it comes to being nut-free, valid school rule, I think anything beyond that can sometimes be a little bit harsh and difficult for parents to follow. And I always say, you know, again, it's up to the parents and carers to decide what goes in their child's lunchbox. And if the schools are providing those healthy ideas, then that's a great thing. All right, so let's think about, I'm here to talk about healthy lunchboxes. So whenever I talk about, you know, making up healthy choices, we think about this guide to healthy eating, so this balance. And I always talk about, you know, how we need to be guided by those core food groups, so the 5 main food groups in our diet that provide the nutrients that our bodies need. And I sort of link those food groups to what they do for the body, and it's a really good way for children to understand, you know, that food is nourishment, and this is how the food helps me to be a healthy individual. So number 1, grain foods. So we love our grain foods, particularly for children, because that provides their energy. And we call those our go foods because it helps them run around and be active, and it fuels the muscles, provides the energy, and it also helps with fueling the brain as well. And I'll talk through in greater detail some ideas of these foods. Then we've got our vegetables and our fruits, which is sort of those green sections. So these we call our glow foods. So our glow foods being vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, all the wonderful colour that's coming from these foods that help to fight illness and diseases, hence a glowing body. We've got our dairy and our dairy alternatives. We call those our grow foods. So that's really where we get our protein and calcium in particular, which is important for healthy bones. And our meat and alternatives are also grow foods. So that's, again, protein in particular. And in this food group, we'll also get some important minerals like iron and zinc and so on. So you can sort of get an idea that if we have a balance of something from each of those food groups in a lunchbox, we're getting a good mix of nutrition during the day. So let's just break that down a little bit more and see what that looks like across each of those food groups. So if I go to grains to begin with, so think about, I mean, this is the easiest thing usually to put in a lunchbox, and we've done a lot of surveys with parents in the past to try and get an idea of, well, where are we struggling? What food groups are the hardest? And grains is probably the easiest. So bread's pretty easy to access, it's cheap. Try to get the wholemeal varieties. We can move into wraps. I love the little pita bread. So you can see those little pita crisps rather. So when you wrap bread's getting a bit old, or even when you slice bread's getting a bit old, the greatest thing to do is to just cut it up, put it in the oven, and let it dry out completely and turn into an actual cracker. So healthy cracker, really cheap. It's stuff that you'd probably otherwise throw out. And you can put some little seasoning on there, or you can put some grated cheese as it cooks in the oven. So I love those pita crisps. Brown rice and pasta, so making up some of those sort of lovely salads with those grains can be a nice thing to put in the lunchbox. If you are buying crackers, look for the whole grain crackers, and other things like rice paper rolls can be really good grain ideas as well. So usually that's not a problem. Vegetables. Vegetables often is where we get stuck because sometimes we see vegetables, or particularly children see vegetables as the less enticing of foods, and it is the one food group that we're just not eating enough of, and it's the one food group that can actually do incredible things for our health and well-being. So try to think of some vegetables that you can put in the lunchbox. And I've got some ideas for you here. So good old veggie sticks are fabulous. So chopping up some celery, carrot, cucumber, capsicum can be really good little sticks. You can have those with dips. Little sugar snap or snow peas are great just on their own, and they're fun to eat. If children aren't really into the vegetable sticks, then what you can do is start to explore vegetable-based dips. And there are quite a variety out there. Think of the ones that are hummus-based, so chickpea-based. And then there's, you know, your carrot, your beetroot, pumpkin, sweet potato. So there's quite a variety of dips that we can purchase and also make ourselves to get the vegetable content in there. I know for me, that's often one of the ways that helps me eat my veggies is when I blend it up and turn it into a dip. And you can use that on sandwiches and wraps as well. Coleslaw is a fantastic one. Kids are usually a little bit more interested in coleslaw than just like a green tossed salad or so on, because, you know, there might be some mayo in there that helps to bind it together and make it yummy. And coleslaw is a really lovely thing to pop in a roll with some protein or cheese or something and make, or a wrap as well. So I often go to coleslaw as a simple vegetable sauce. And then there's lots of baby vegetables you can get now as well. So you can, rather than having to go to the trouble of chopping up your veggie sticks, think little baby vegetables like your little mini carrots and cucumbers. I love corn spears, and the corn spears out of the tin are fabulous. That was my go-to quite often for my children when they're little, because kids are quite okay with corn because it's got that sweetness associated with it. And they're easy to eat, particularly for little children. It's a nice finger food as well. Baby tomatoes, of course, are fantastic too. So there's our vegetable ideas. Again, if anyone has any ideas that work for them, pop them in the chat box. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Dairy. So remembering the dairy foods is the food group that provides a bit of protein and also the bone building calcium as well. And I like to see a little bit of dairy in the lunchbox most days. And of course, the easiest dairy is usually cheese. So whether it's cut into cubes or slices or grated and put into sandwiches or wraps. Look, I'm even perfectly fine with the cheese slices. The flippy flappy cheese, I call it. With the plastic coating because it's already got its little plastic wrapper. They were quite a common thing for my children's lunchbox because they're so convenient. You can just pick it out, put it in a lunchbox, and children love eating out of that cheese as well. So don't be too perturbed by some of those cheeses. I think they are still a good option, and they're very convenient. Just, you know, if again, cheese, if it's in the cold section, then it's real cheese. Try to stay away from some of those highly processed cheese spreads that are not really cheese. It's just some salty yellow mush that can be put on things. So go for actual cheese or grated cheese as much as you can, or those cheese slices. Tubs of yogurt or those yogurt pouches can be really convenient as well. They can be quite expensive, so I quite often would get a big tub of yogurt and decant that into a little container to pop in the lunchbox. And we're going through a little bit on the what to look for on labels, because yogurts can be quite high in sugar. So the things to look for, just look for the lower sugar ones and the more natural varieties. Some other ideas are those little bocconcini balls. Fun. I remember my daughter went through a phase of having to have those in her lunchbox. Remember, I'm going to be talking about phases, because children will always go through lunchbox phases, and you just ride it. So bocconcini balls can be really fun. And thinking dips as well when it comes to dairy. So using ricotta cheese or creamed cottage cheese as a base for dips, and you can sort of make a tzatziki dip with or with yogurt, with Greek yogurt as well. I sometimes will make a ricotta dip where I blend some tinned beetroot with ricotta cheese, and it's this lovely pink dip, and it's yummy, really, really good. And if your children or yourself, you can't tolerate dairy, then look for those calcium fortified alternatives such as the soy milk poppers or the soy-based yogurts. You can get coconut yogurt and so on. Just try to find, when you are looking for those alternatives, those dairy alternatives, try to check for the ones that do have calcium added to them, because naturally they tend to not have any calcium. So that's the dairy. Meat and alternatives. So when we surveyed parents, this was often the hardest food group when thinking about getting that balance of different foods in the lunchbox. And also it's important to preface this, that this is the food group which bacteria like to grow in as well. So it can be a high risk food group. But we do want to see some of these foods in the lunchbox. And if we look after the lunchbox and make sure they're kept cool, then it shouldn't pose any harm. So in this instance, you know, thinking protein foods, so leftover cold meats, lean chicken, lamb or turkey, I love that. So if you're having a roast dish, a roast meat, then saving some of that meat and having it cold in the lunchbox the next day is great, perfect in sandwiches and wraps. I sometimes would go through a phase where I'll just cook up a heap of chicken tenders and cook those on the weekend, and then once they're cooked, I'll put them in the freezer, and you just take them out and put them in the lunchbox. And children just like to eat those as is on their own, so it doesn't matter if it's not in the form of a sandwich or something. Hard-boiled eggs, love them, really, really good. So just on their own or sliced up or mashed up in a sandwich is fantastic. They're very cheap and versatile. Falafels are fantastic, so thinking some of the meat-free options. So plant-based proteins, foods that are made with legumes, chickpeas like falafels or the hummus dip, baked beans are fantastic as well. Little tins of tuna. So for some people that they might be, oh, tins of tuna on its own. I can tell you that there are kids that just love to just eat the tuna straight out of the tin, and my son's one of those at the moment. As a teenager, he just likes to take a tin of tuna with a fork, and that's what he'll happily eat at school. And what else? Oh, and even little tins of baked beans. So we've gone through another phase where we've had those little bitty tins of baked beans, and the children will just eat those cold out of the tin. So they're quite convenient options that are very nourishing as well. Usually we're pretty good with fruit. Fruit's probably, like grades, we think sandwich, we think a piece of fruit when we think lunch boxes. So fruit tends to go down pretty well, whether that's fresh fruit, whatever's in season, berries, cutting up, you know, the fruit is sometimes really important, particularly to make it more enticing to eat. So those little containers of cut up fruit are great. Whole fruits are very convenient, no effort required. Like, it's the ultimate convenience food, in my opinion, whether it's a banana or an apple or a mandarin. That's easy to peel and eat. Tin fruits in juice. So if you haven't got any fresh fruit on hand, then just opening up a can of tin fruit and decanting that into a little container is no problem. That's actually a really healthy option. And some dried fruits can also be a healthy option as well. So vary it up a little bit, whether it's fresh, it's tinned, it's dried, or whether it's chopped up into little containers. I think we're quite spoilt for choice when it comes to fruit in Australia. All right, so that's the food groups, gone through that. Now I want to focus in a little bit on reading nutrition labels, because let's face it, you know, we're all going to probably buy some packaged foods for the lunchbox, and we need to sort of get a bit of an idea of what is the healthier options when we are buying packaged foods. So I have a example. Well, I do have little snippets here. So there's a fact sheet that you can get from the Healthy Lunchbox Week website to download all this information. So where there's a little, I put a little fact sheet on the slides. That means you can just go straight to the website and get this fact sheet. But I'm just going to unpack this a little bit more, because I want to explain what we're looking at when we're reading nutrition information panels. So every packaged food that you get by law has to have this nutrition information panel on it, and you'll all probably be familiar with it. There might be a packet of muesli bars or some crackers or cereal, and there's lots of information on here. It can be quite confusing with all the numbers. So I'm just going to break it down for you now. What we need to do when we're reading a nutrition information panel on a package, so say for instance, this might be a muesli bar that we're looking at here. We want to compare, to identify the healthy option, we want to always compare per 100 grams. So you look at the per 100 gram column. If we were comparing per serve, well, there's a risk that each manufacturer will define their own serve. So that could be 30 grams for one manufacturer, could be 50 grams for the other. So we're not actually comparing like with like. So always try to go at the per 100 grams column. And then I've got a bit of a guide I'm going to go through with what to look for with specific nutrients within that per 100 gram column. So saturated fat we'll go to first. So the saturated fat's one of the harmful fats that if we have too much of that saturated fat in our diet, then it can actually contribute to our risk of elevated cholesterol and heart disease later in life. So we want to look for those products that are lower in saturated fat, and a good guide, particularly when it's a processed food like a biscuit or a muesli bar or a cracker, there's a good chance that the type of saturated fat is particularly a nasty one like palm oil. So a good guide to go for is looking for less than 3 grams per 100 grams. So if you're comparing biscuits and you just pick up a pack of biscuits, check at a glance and you can see, well, what's the fat look like? If it's a little bit more, then again, you choose the one that has the lower fat. But it's not always about the fat content. There's also sugar. So we've got to make sure we're not having too much sugary food. So a lot of processed foods, just loads of sugar in there, loads of fat and sugar, because it tastes nice. And it also helps to make the product last. So foods that we're looking for less than 15 grams per 100 grams of sugar in a product, such as a sweetish sort of biscuit or a muesli bar or cereals. And then sodium. So sodium is the salt in the product. Too much sodium can be harmful for the body over long term. It can increase our risk of high blood pressure and heart disease further down the line. So choosing the lower sodium option, and again, we've got a bit of a guide here, less than 400 milligrams per 100 grams is what we're looking at as a lower sodium option. And then fiber is another really important nutrient. So we need to have more fiber in our diets. This is one thing we're looking for more of. And you'll find the fiber is in things like grains, breads, cereals, and crackers as well. You're not going to see any fiber in dairy foods, for instance, or protein foods, because they're just not a fiber containing food group. But when you're looking at packaged products, particularly your muesli bars and crackers and so on, try to get those that have more than 5 grams per 100 grams of fiber, and then you're getting something in a bit of a healthier range. So if you want to access this information, then again, as I mentioned, we can get this from the Healthy Lunchbox Week website. And if that's all looking a little bit challenging, the nutrition information panel, because let's face it, they are pretty tiny panels that you've got to read, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Then there's this thing called the Health Star rating, so the front of pack Health Star. So you would be familiar with seeing some of these on packages, but it's not on all packages. So unlike the nutrition information panel, which is compulsory for all packaged foods. The health star rating is not at all mandatory. So it's up to the food manufacturer to decide if they're going to put that health star rating on their package. And it can be really helpful because it's quick at a glance. Just grab something, and the more stars, the healthier the product. And it's really useful, particularly again, for those biscuits, crackers, muesli bars, cereals, and so on that we often reach for to pop in the lunchbox. Always remember to compare the products in the same category. So 2 stars in a dairy is very different to 2 stars in a cereal bar, because each of the categories that are used, so whether it's a cereal or a biscuit or a dairy food, the way the health star rating is determined is based on the nutrient profile of that food. So obviously fiber doesn't exist in the dairy food, so that's not going to be accounted for, whereas in the breads it does. And so more fiber is going to have more stars. It's also accounts for things like vegetable content, mentioned fiber, the sugar, the fat, and the salt, making sure that they're lower. There's quite this intense algorithm behind it all. As I mentioned, we're going to aim for more stars. So I usually say, particularly in the crackers, muesli, bar, biscuit kind of categories, 4 or more stars, and you're doing pretty well. And remember, fruits and veggies, they aren't rated because they're already 5 stars. So we don't need to be putting a health star rating on those. Now, as I mentioned, not all packaged foods will have that health star rating, but we can get around that. And there's this really awesome app called Food Switch. And this has been put together by the George Institute. And you can download this app. You just get onto your app store and type in Food Switch, and it will come up. It's free. And what it does is once you've got the app on your phone, you open it up and you pick up a product and you scan the barcode of that product, and it will tell you instantly what the health star rating is of that product. So we can sort of get around it. So manufacturers who choose not to put the health star rating on their product, we can still find out what that health star rating is by scanning the barcode. So it's a fabulous, fabulous app. I use it all the time. And what's really good about this app is when you're scanning the product, it'll tell you the health star rating, but it will also tell you the health star rating of other products that might be similar to that would be a higher health star rating. So it helps to nudge you towards the healthier options. So when you walk into the supermarket and there's a whole row of muesli bars, which there is, or crackers, and you're not sure which to get, then you can just pick up one that you like the look of, scan it, and then you instantly see what the health star rating is. And then you'll also see, well, what are the other products in this kind of category that could be a healthier choice that I can find on the shelf instead. So it's a really, really useful tool to get. And I think it's a fun one also for kids too, when you've got your children with you shopping, because it's always good to bring the kids shopping. Yes, it can be good, sometimes not. But if you task them with something such as using the app and finding out the health star rating, that can help them to identify the healthy options as well. All right, so that's enough about the labels. Now I wanted to go through ages and stages, because I imagine that we have quite a range of families or parents here that have children from preschool to high school. So, and each age range requires, you know, a different variation to their nutrient needs, and making sure that the food that we're provided suits them. So we'll start off with preschoolers. So what just started school or prep or kindy, so beginning of school, we wanted to make sure that we think about the container that we're using. Is it easy enough for them to open, for little hands to open? And the containers within the containers as well. So that's the most important thing, is can they even open the food, the containers in the first place? And then what to put in those containers. So I really liked finger foods for young children. They like to eat with their hands. They're going to be probably eating with their hands, and bite-sized pieces, so that there's less of a commitment when it comes to eating each of those food items. It's not so overwhelming. So those sort of bento style lunch boxes can be really useful for the little ones, and they do like to have that agency over what they're going to eat next, and that sort of pick and mix type lunchbox suits the little ones quite well. Be careful not to overload the lunchbox. I think as parents, sometimes we think that they need a lot of food, they've got to get through, or we're worried that they're not going to eat this, so I'll put that instead and that and that. So there's this huge variety, and that can be really overwhelming for little ones. And if we overload it, it can be so overwhelming that they just sort of don't know where to start, so they won't eat at all. So think about, what is realistic for them, and and also the other thing is including familiar food, so food that they already know and they enjoy. And that doesn't mean putting a cupcake in every day, because that they'll enjoy it. But just think about, if you're going to try some new vegetables, for instance, don't expect that they're going to eat it. So if they don't normally have salad vegetables, or are a big fan of salad vegetables, don't be putting so much salad vegetables in a lunchbox, because they're just not going to eat it. Maybe what you'd need to do instead is perhaps do like a little dip instead, or grate them up, or think about other ways that we can include the vegetables, or the vegetables that they like. And for me, it was always those little baby corn spears out of the tin, or the chickpea or the hummus dips. So think about those familiar foods that you know that they will probably eat. And if you do put in something new, make sure you're always associated with something that they already know and are familiar with. So that's always a really important thing when we're introducing new foods to young children. So that's the preschoolers. And this is a really good fact sheet here on lunchbox finger food. So I've just got a range of ideas of what suits littlies in their lunchbox. So instead of like the whole sandwich, cut up into little sandwich squares, for instance, and they're just nice little bite-sized pieces of sandwiches. Little mini meatballs or falafels are usually quite good. I used to make chicken nuggets, my own homemade chicken nuggets, and they're a fabulous cold little snack in the lunchbox as well. When it comes to, particularly for the young ones, so anyone who might still be in long daycare, for instance, or under 5, it's important to mind the choking risks associated with some foods. So if there are grapes or cherry tomatoes, cut those in half so it minimises that choking risk. And love berries, your little frozen milk poppers, or just a milk popper on its own is nice and convenient. And when you're having the fruit, think about chopping up that fruit. So rather than throwing in a whole orange or even a whole apple, cut it up or slinky it, or do something to make it a bit more enticing and enjoyable for them to eat. Because remember, the little ones, they're getting wobbly teeth as well, and so it's harder for them to bite into whole foods as well. So that's just another thing to be mindful of. If we move into our primary school age, so this is where kids are starting to become a little bit more independent and want to have some more choice over the matter of what goes in their lunchbox. Really include them as much as possible. So when going shopping, so this is where using that Food Switch app could be quite fun and useful for them. Cooking, helping them letting them help in the kitchen, and helping to pack the lunchbox as well. Remember to think about durability, particularly for this age group, because they're running around throwing the bags about the place, and food will get mushed up and damaged quite easily in the school bag. So look for durable containers. I usually find that soft fruits like bananas or stone fruits really do need to be kept in some kind of container that retains them and stops them from being knocked about too much. Whole fruits are great. They're convenient for this age group. So whether it's a whole apple or a mandarin or stone fruit, and kids are usually pretty good with munching into those. But again, some children prefer it cut up. So still, think about whether your child might be more likely to eat it if it's in its cut up form in a container. And for this age group, we've got to try and keep it fun and enjoyable as well. So something that helps to keep it fun beyond the food itself is think about popping some little notes in there. We've got these lovely lunchbox notes ideas, so you can print them out or do what you like with them, or just come up with your own yourself. And that just adds another element of fun to the lunchbox and excitement for the children to want to open their lunchbox and what little message have I got in there today. Helps to connect them back to home as well and think about you, which is always a lovely thing at that age. So they're good ideas to pop in the lunchbox as well. Now, once you get to the high school stage, well, things start to change quite a bit. You know, they are now a bit more responsible for their own food decisions. And so you've got to just hand things over, let them lead. Hopefully by now they've got a pretty good grounding of what their body needs and what is important in their lunchbox and what supports their nutritional needs. Think about prepping on weekends, getting them to help prep on weekends. So whether it's cooking up a batch of, you know, healthy muffins, or some pizza scrolls, some, you know, whatever they like to do, get them to sort of start to get into the habit of prepping in advance. Grab and go items are often a good thing. Well, that's what I find for my teenage children. Once they get to this age, of course, you know, they have high sleep needs, so they're sleeping in, and it's a mad rush to get them out of bed, let alone to get them to school in time. So if we haven't prepped enough on the weekend or in advance, then we're going to have some of those grab and go items, which is why we have that prep in. But some of those grab and go items, look, it might be some of those packaged foods like cereal bars or muesli bars. I would often get just some healthier cereal, like Wheat Bix Bites or something, and pop that in a Ziploc bag, and they can go with that. Even things like poppers, the milk poppers are great. I think particularly for teenagers, look, even up and goes can be quite nourishing because they do have extra vitamins in them. Yes, they have sugar in them, but they are still very high in protein, which is why I put a point about protein foods, because children at this age, particularly going through puberty, their protein needs are quite high. Think about teenage boys, and the growth rate is incredible. I'm seeing it right now with my son who's 16, and the muscles, they're building, and so they do need significant protein. So I'm looking for those protein foods, whether it's some meat or alternatives, or some of those poppers such as up and goes or sausage and poppers, just helps to give them that little bit more nutrition during the day, and it can be quite convenient. For my daughter, she got into the salad bowl thing, and she would make up her different, like, poke bowl type things, which are fantastic. Rolls and wraps tend to be quite the go for the teenagers. And then you'll find there's some teens that are like, hang on, I'm not taking a lunchbox to school because that's just not cool. And you just got to work with that. You know, that's okay. They don't have to have lunchboxes like they used to when they were littlies. You know, maybe it is just a packet of this and a packet of that, as long as it's the healthier options. Throw in a piece of fruit. My son at the moment, he's not going near lunchboxes. He'll just get a Ziploc bag and put in a can of tuna, a muesli bar, and he'll probably take an up and go as well. That's okay, because I know that is still nourishing food. And what's really important for those children who are a bit not really au fait with having lunch boxes at school, make sure they have a nourishing breakfast. If they have a decent breakfast, it sets them up for the day. It's not the end of the world if they're not eating sufficient amounts during the day. And then when they get home, giving them the opportunity to have a decent, nourishing afternoon tea at the end of the day. So understanding that it's okay if they don't take a lunchbox, and it's okay if they choose not to eat much food at school. We don't want to be pushing them to eat foods when they're not comfortable with that. But as long as we're giving them opportunities to make up for it, either before or after school, that's really important. And it's also being a good role model yourselves. So if you're prepping some lunch for yourself before you go to work, then that helps them to be inspired to want to do that as well. So, but you've got to understand, again, children are becoming quite independent at this age. They're going to have their own ideas of what they want to have in their diet. Some may go through phases of deciding to become meat-free or going on a plant-based diet. And, you know, respecting those decisions is really important, but ensuring that they are choosing alternatives and still getting that balance in their diet is our role as parents and carers. Okay, so sometimes looking at swaps, healthy swaps, and this goes for all age groups. We do get caught up in the good old, marketing of lunchbox items, so that aren't always healthy. So whether it's like fruit sort of poppers and chips and biscuits and so on. So think about, well, how can we swap those things out for something healthy? So easy thing is with your breads, sort of white bread, go for the high fiber options. Particularly, you can get high fiber white bread, but I like to see the grain breads or the wholemeal breads. And if we get children started with those breads right from the start, they're more likely to be used to it. And that's just the bread that they have. Try not to have too much sort of fat in there. So, or swap it, putting in the healthier fats like avocado, using hummus or plant-based dips are great as a spread. Limit the cordials and juice poppers or sugary drinks and bring it across to plain milk. And always water is great. Chippies is always a factor. I grew up with having chippies in my lunchbox, and I'm not saying don't, but I just think, just not every day. And they're expensive as well. So if you can swap it out for some healthy options like your veggie sticks and hummus, or even plain popcorn. So making up if you have a popcorn popper and just chucking in some popcorn in the morning, that was another phase we went through. We would make bags of popcorn at home and the kids would have their popcorn, and we would put some flavours in the popcorn to make it tasty, but it was still much healthier than the chips and the biscuits, and cheaper as well. Little pikelets are lovely. Making those or putting some fruit in the pikelets. Have been known to put the odd choc chip in the pikelet too. Again, the balance and enjoyment's important. And cakes and muffins and buns and things. So if you have got some leftovers from a party, I understand. I would often put leftover cake in the lunchbox, but thankfully I did get in notes home, and hopefully you wouldn't either. But yeah, just on a more regular basis, think about healthier kind of alternatives such as a banana bread or fruit loaf or homemade muesli slice. And you can go onto the Healthy Lunchbox Week website. We've got some great baking options, healthier options. And you can get this information on a fact sheet from our website as well. Remember to use your leftovers. Love leftovers. And when I think dinner, I think, what am I going to have what can I use out of this dinner for leftovers the next day? So whether it's leftover grilled meats, some meatballs, if you had a barbecue on the weekend, there's leftover salad there. You could do homemade pizzas, frittatas. So yeah, always think about those leftovers, and they can be a little bit more novel, something different to the old sandwich. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're going to talk about food safety, and I just wanted to highlight, what we need to do to make sure that those lunchboxes stay safe and the contents within there do not have too much bacterial growth due to the temperature that they will be exposed to. So I want to keep it as cool as possible. So insulated containers, throwing in an ice brick is really important, or I would sometimes freeze like a yogurt pouch or a milk popper, and that would keep it nice and cold, and then that would make that milk lovely and icy as well. And remember to keep them clean, because they do get knocked about and pretty disgusting, our lunch boxes, and even those insulated things. So clean them out. Sometimes I'd give them, particularly those insulated containers can be quite hard to clean. So I'd sometimes give them a little spray with vinegar or bleach just to kill the bacteria that's been growing in there. And finally, putting it all together. So lunchbox is going to look so different from different people. And I think what's really wonderful is, play around with what your kids might like. Be creative. Experiment a little bit. Don't be afraid to again, the leftovers, but also, maybe just a sandwich and fruit is your thing. So, but if you need some inspiration, there's more ideas on the Healthy Lunchbox Week website, which is the next slide here. So you can go on to the healthylunchboxweek.org.au. As you can see, Healthy Lunchbox Week has been, but the material will always stay there. So it's available throughout the year. We have some great fact sheets, which I've just highlighted through this session. Heaps of recipes, lots of multicultural recipes. We went through a year where we really stepped up range of cultural variation in the lunchbox. There's some simple videos to watch and shareable links to other great reputable organisations that also have fantastic lunchbox information. So there's a lot out there. I think just knowing where to go and get that idea, and you should be set for the year ahead. All right, so I'm going to roll up my side of the talking, and I'm just going to hand over to questions. Maddie, have we got any?
We do. I hope everyone can hear me a little bit better. Apologies for earlier. So we've got a few questions that have come up. So is there more information regarding how much of non-meat alternatives would equal to a standard portion of meat? For example, would 500 grams of chicken breast equal to 800 grams of lentils?
Oh, that's a great question. And absolutely. So you do get more protein in your meat than you do in the plant-based protein foods, for instance. And an example, a good place to get that information is the Eat for Health website. And there is a guide, the Guide to Healthy Eating, I've got it right here, for children. And it does break down in the meat and meat alternative section what a serve is equivalent to. So, for instance, if you were having, for instance, about, say, some legumes, so 1 cup of legumes is equivalent to about 80 grams of cooked chicken meat. So you can go there to see where there's the different serve sizes and what they look like. But I'm the type of dietitian that doesn't count my grams or calories, and it's about getting that balance. So I wouldn't be too hung up on quantity. I think just as long as you're putting some of each of those food groups in there, then they're going to be getting that nice balance, and don't be too concerned about whether they're meeting what is actually what we would call their requirements, because each day our food intake varies and what we have access to varies. So as long as we're getting that balance, that's really important.
Thank you for that one. We've also just got a question around dried fruits, around having high levels of sugar.
Yeah.
Can we talk
Excellent.
about that a little
Thanks for
bit?
bringing that up, because sometimes I don't want to bang on too much about dried fruits as a healthy option, because yes, they do have, they're concentrated in sugar. So most dried fruits, if you buy, naturally dried fruits, there won't be any sugar added to them. But because the moisture has dried out of them, it makes the fruit itself quite concentrated in sugar, and we tend to easy to overconsume. I know I love my dried fruits, but also the problem is because of the concentrated sugar and the stickiness, they get stuck on the teeth, so not so good for our teeth either. So when I talk about dried fruit, again, in balance. So I would rather children have dried fruit than lollies, for instance. But again, those little containers of sultanas, they can be really great in a lunchbox, but I wouldn't say every day. So that can just be another option. Know that it does provide some fiber. It'll give them plenty of minerals. Not a lot of vitamin C because of the water's coming out, and so with the vitamin C. But you're absolutely right. They are more concentrated in sugar. And hopefully try to avoid any of the dried fruits with added sugars, like cranberries, for instance. You often do have added sugars because it's such a tart fruit. Yeah, but thanks for that.
Thank you. And just on the sugar again, would you trust products which say it's sugar-free and have 0 sugar, but they're maybe a little bit sweet? Are they deceptive?
Oh, that's such a good question, yes, because there are a lot of products out there that claim to be sugar-free, when in actual fact, or they say no added sugar. So often it's no added sugar. And that is true in a sense that they haven't added sugar per se, but they might be choosing or making foods that are quite concentrated in fruit sugar, for instance. So that's an example with the dried fruit. It's quite concentrated in its natural sugars. So it still has a lot of natural sugar, but it's sugar-free, or it's no added sugar. So the best thing to do is, particularly some of those bars that you can get, so they might be like a fruit bar or something, it will say no added sugar, yet you look on the nutrition information panel, there's loads of sugar in there. So often it's because it's made with dried fruits, or it could be made with reconstituted fruit juice, which is a common thing you'll see in those squishy sort of fruit squishy things. So, and same with the yogurts as well. They might put reconstituted fruit juice, concentrated fruit purees or something like that, which actually is quite high in sugar, natural sugars, but they can still say it's moderated sugar, if you know what I mean. So this is a real problem, and we want to be able to make it more clear on the nutrition information panel of the amount of free sugars that's in products. But you can't tell right now, it's just total sugars. So that would include the fruit sugars as well. If it says sugar-free, but it still tastes sweet, well, then it's going to have a sweetener in it. They'll have an artificial sweetener, and a lot of the yogurts will have artificial sweeteners in them. How do I feel about those? I don't think children should be having too much artificial sweeteners. I would rather see fruit with to sweeten the product rather than an artificial sweetener, because we're finding that they can be harmful to our gut bacteria as well. So yeah, just be mindful. So many different products out there that can get us a little bit confused.
Great. Next question, could you suggest some ways to use some positive language around kids to be more encouraging to try new foods, especially when they don't really want a healthier option?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's my kids every day. I think the best thing to do, yeah, always using positive language, and focusing on what is yummy as well. At the end of the day, we want to enjoy our food. We're not going to eat it if we don't like it. So trying to get our kids to eat carrot sticks when they clearly do not like them. Like, I have grown up not really liking celery and carrots, let's face it. And if that was going to be in my lunchbox, I wasn't going to eat it. So we've got to find that common ground where children do enjoy a particular type, some healthy foods. They may not enjoy the variety, but they'll at least have some fruits. And some kids may be more interested, say, for instance, in grapes or berries, but won't touch an apple. Or they might like their vegetables chopped up or in a dip form, but they won't eat sticks like me. So, it's a matter of finding a type of way that they like to eat their food. Sometimes the texture can be a challenge for some children as well. But yeah, always focusing on the positive and not making them eat it or telling them they must eat it because it's good for them. Or if they don't eat it, then something's going to go wrong. And being a good role model yourself. Always I go back to the parents. Well, how are you eating yourself? And are you eating those healthy foods? Because how can you expect your children to eat those healthy foods if you don't enjoy them yourself? So that's really probably the key.
Lovely. And another question, with just wondering about the health star rating, as they give Nutri-Grain a 4-star rating, but they're very high in sugar. So
Yep.
that's just a bit confusing. And
Yep.
what do kids think about that being an alternative as a healthy option?
Yeah, yep. Look, Nutri-Grain's better than lollies and chocolate bars, let's put it that way. But you're absolutely right. This is where manufacturers that understand the algorithm behind the health star rating can do some changes to the formulation of their product. And in doing that, Nutri-Grain is a perfect example. Whilst they do still have quite a lot of sugar in their product, they have managed to get a higher health star rating because they've added extra fiber, because they've fortified it with nutrients. So it does have iron, it does have folate. So there are some vitamins in there. And they also have a protein. They're fortified with protein as well. So it does, believe it or not, have quite a lot of nutrients in there. And the problem is it's also very high in sugar. So this is where, something like Nutri-Grain, I certainly wouldn't give it to my children on a daily basis, but, and I would see Nutri-Grain as a healthier alternative to chocolates, lollies, and biscuits, for instance, but it's certainly not the healthiest. We could do better than that. Yes, unfortunately, there's always going to be this when there is a rating system and when there's manufacturers out there trying to, create that health halo effect on their products. And sometimes it's about, you need to look at the whole product. Yes, there's some nutritional value in there, but there's also quite a lot of sugar. So if we're going to be eating this kind of food, don't have too much other sugary food during the day. I think is important, but a good point. And I think unfortunately the processed food world is a very misleading and confusing place. And I always tell people, try to stick to more whole foods as much as possible, because then you actually know what you're having.
Great. We're going to have to wrap it up there because we've hit 1 o'clock, but thank you so much, Leanne, for taking us through all this nutritious information for healthy lunchboxes today. It's been a really insightful event that we've been able to run, and we really appreciate everybody that's been able to attend as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. And I noticed there was someone that just asked a link to the resources. Just all you have to do is go healthylunchboxweek.org.au and you're straight there. So
Lovely.
thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining.